Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Career Pathing for Business Growth. Today's presenter is Kristi Weierbach, and before I turn it over to her, just a few housekeeping items. You can customize what you're seeing on the screen by going to the GoToWebinar screen viewer. We do have two different audio options available this afternoon, the computer audio and phone call option. The phone call option coincides with the numbers that you were given during your registration. So if you are having any issues there, try toggling back and forth between the two, as we do see that the phone call option is a bit more reliable as it is not streamed over internet. You can download the handout that is going to be presented today that Kristi will walk through in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel. So go ahead and grab that. If not, it'll be sent to you via email after the presentation concludes. Any questions that you have for Kristi today, please drop them into the questions panel, as we do not monitor the chat box during the presentation. And we will have 3 polling questions, as we are offering CPE today. So make sure that you are answering all 3 of those in order to qualify for CPE. And speaking of that, we do distribute our CPE through a third party called SimpleCert. So if you are looking for that, look for it about a couple business days after the webinar concludes. And if you're not seeing it in your direct inbox, check your junk and your spam folders, as sometimes it likes to slip into there. And last but not least, our survey. Please let us know how we did during the presentation, list any questions that we were not able to cover, and that is where you will select if you need that CPE credit. So without further ado, Kristi, they're all yours.
All right, well, thank you so much, Kaylee. She's going to stay in the background there just in case we bump into any issues or challenges. She's great at stepping in and helping us continue to move forward smoothly. And as Kaylee said, if you have questions, please put them into the chat area. I'll do my best throughout today's hour to stop along the way to see if we have any questions relevant to each section. But certainly, I will do my very best to leave some time at the end as well that we can talk through questions that you have. And please, if you have any insights or if I spark an idea, please share it. I definitely love the collaboration and the ability for us to hear and see and share different experiences. So welcome to today's session. I'm really excited about this topic. I'm passionate about it. As we all know that we continue to face struggles and challenges with finding and keeping talent, and it's not going to stop, at least here in the short term. So we need to be strategic about the way that we lure people into our organizations, and maybe lure isn't the right word, but we definitely want to be able to have them pick us over the competitor, right? Choose us and stay with us for a long time, so that way we can continue to learn and grow together and enjoy this journey as we're working each and every day. Many of you are familiar with who I am, and so I won't go into my full bio. Certainly, if you want to read about all that stuff, go ahead and go out to our website. We have a link to my LinkedIn page at the end of the presentation. Feel free to poke around and let me know if you have questions about any experiences I had along the way. A couple of things that I did just want to share with you as to where I'm focusing my attention. Certainly, this is not all inclusive, and random things do come up from time to time, but you're going to get a peek in the window at the organizational architecture. We've talked about that last fall. You're going to hear us continue that conversation and dig deeper now as we talk about career paths and how that all fits into the model and framework that we discussed previously. If you're interested in hearing about those sessions because you weren't able to join at that time, or this is the first time you're meeting me and you haven't heard of them before, feel free to go to our website. You can capture any of our webinars for free, take a look at them, watch them 1, 2, 3 times, if you will, and share them as well. Compensation benchmarking, definitely a hot topic right now. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but definitely have been spending a lot of time focused on that to make sure that people are paying competitively, right? So when we are looking to recruit and retain people, that we're doing it in a way that meets the needs and the demands of the people we're looking to hire. As you can see, recruiting and retention, very near and dear to my heart. I strongly believe that if we can retain our people, we don't have to work nearly as hard to recruit them. And you'll see some ideas here as we move forward as to how you can maybe elevate what you do and hopefully retain those good people you work so hard to find and have them join your organization. And then we do have to worry about risk and compliance from time to time. So as you think about everything under the sun with HR, that definitely can be a tricky area, very delicate or sensitive sometimes. So feel free to reach out if there's ever a situation that you've experienced for the first time and may not be quite sure how to proceed from there. So today we're going to walk through the job architecture. What is it? Why is it important? I'm going to share some ideas and thoughts with you throughout that. We're going to then talk about the career paths, right? How does the job architecture set the stage for those career paths? And then we're going to align it all together. We're going to bring together the job architecture, the career paths, and then pair with it the compensation. So we'll get into a little bit about the benchmarking during that section. And then I'll have a couple of closing remarks and hopefully answer some questions that you might have. Doesn't have to be a one-way conversation today. Feel free to please pick my brain or share ideas. Let's go ahead and get started with our first poll question here. I'm interested to hear which one of these do you believe would be most beneficial to you and your organization today? Maybe it'll change in the future, but do your best just to give us an indication. Is it that you would have a really good career path framework to use? Would you like to see a pay grade framework? Because maybe hiring decisions are causing your pay to be out of whack, right? And there's no system or structure for the way that you're paying people. Do you need to update your job descriptions, right? Sometimes our jobs evolve over time depending on the type of work we're doing and so forth. So that could be just an area of opportunity for you right now, is to brush them up, dust them off a little bit and get them current. And then maybe it's all of the above. Maybe you're sitting in a place like, hey, yeah, I want to elevate all of these areas. So if you go ahead and make your selection, we'll go ahead and share the results here in a moment. We're just about at 85%. All right, well, as you can see, all of the above is the most common answer. And yes, each one of these can definitely help you with your recruiting and retention strategy. We're going to talk about each and every one of these. So thank you so much for answering. And hopefully you'll be able to take some specific action items back to your team. That's really important to me, as I can share knowledge all day long, but you need to be able to act on it, right? Apply it and use it in a simple way rather than scratching your head saying, wow, this is too overwhelming. So let's go ahead and set the stage for our conversation today. I wanted to refresh all of your memories about the business life cycle. Some of you may have studied it along the way in any college course that you've been part of. Maybe you've been talking in your leadership team meetings about this. And so it's really important to understand, where are you currently at in your organization and where are you going to go? So if you're starting out a new business as an entrepreneur, or maybe you're a business that's been around for a while and you now are expanding and adding a new service, you acquired another business that now allows you to offer something different, you could be in a growth mode, right? And so what does that all mean for the conversation today? We're going to talk about that. You could also be in a very stable place. So think about McDonald's, right? McDonald's is very stable. It's a mature organization. And from time to time, they reinvent something, the logo or the look and feel of the building. They're introducing technology now. I saw recently that there's actually a location, and I forget where it's at, where it is 100% people-less. So it's all automated and the technology is taking the orders, preparing the food, and then delivering it to you. So wow, from the place that they started to where they're at today. But each one of those milestones causes us to do things differently internally, causes us to maybe hire different skill sets, different people, and could potentially cause us to go out of business if we don't do it the correct way, and or it could cause us to reinvent or reimagine ourselves. So we want to think about where we are in this journey. I'm going to repeat this slide as we go further along because it'll be important to connect it throughout the conversation today, and I don't want us to lose sight of it. But that's one thing you should talk about at your leadership team. Where are you as an organization as a whole? And then are there areas of your business that might be in one or more of these areas? You might have a stable part of your service, and then you also might be introducing something new. So just give that some thought. We're going to spend the first part of this discussion here talking about these items that are in this graph, kind of like a Venn diagram type of graph. But essentially, at the very top is our organizational architecture, We've talked about that before. I'm gonna do a quick overview on the next slide here, but that's really important to set the stage for where we go next, right? We're gonna work our way down through to the job architecture. I'm gonna define it for you. I'm gonna give you some examples. We'll then talk about the job matrix, and I'm not sure if other people would use the same terminology. Maybe they have something more creative, but this is the way in which I describe these necessary steps that we'll walk through, which all leads us to those career paths. Then we get to job description. You all know what that is. And then we're going to talk about what employee leveling is. So let's go ahead and start with that organizational architecture. As you can see, we have 5 gears on this graphic, right? And they're purposely sized differently. We want to put a lot of emphasis on that first gear in the purpose, right? So whether you call it a mission statement, whatever you want to call it, it really is just the why. Why are you doing what you do? Because when you're looking to hire people, you want to make sure they connect to that reason, or long term, they're not going to be motivated to stay with your organization. Are you giving back to the community, having a very specific impact on the community? Are you building bridges and keeping people safe as they transport from one place to another, right? We could go on with many other examples, but knowing your purpose and why we do what we do helps you sell the organization better, and then continuously connect back to that, so that way people know why they stay working for you and why maybe they won't be lured away pretty easily to a competitor, etc., or step away from the industry, right? Then once we know why we're doing what we're doing, we're going to say, okay, well, how are we going to go about doing that with our strategy? What's that vision for the future? And do we have the right structure in place, right? Are our teams set up in the way that's going to be most successful to help us execute the work that we do, whether it's a service or producing a product? Do we have those processes in place so we can consistently deliver high level of service and quality of product and so forth? And all of that takes us to the culture, because if we're doing all of those things, it's encouraging the behaviors we want to see. And then naturally, our culture should be in a pretty good place. Yes, sometimes we have sour apples that get in the bunch, but overall, the culture then should be at a place where people are like, wow, I want to go work there. Or, clients feel it. They just feel how people are excited, motivated, and energized to work with you. They're not just happy because you gave them a pizza party on Friday, right? So anyway, let's move on here. We're going to dig into the job architecture. So as we think about the structure, there's a couple different pieces in the structure. How are we corporately structured? What's the governance and so forth? But when we think about the work that we do, the job architecture ultimately is a framework. It's that structure of the hierarchy of the jobs within the organization. And it does help to guide future talent needs, helps motivate the behaviors that support where we're headed and the strategies that we've defined. And it helps us communicate a consistent language throughout the organization, right? So this does definitely help with attracting and retaining talent. So if I know what my role is when I step into the organization, and I know what's expected of me, and I know what lies in front of me as far as opportunities for growth, whether vertically or horizontally, that's really exciting to me. And that's a place that I would want to go work, rather than a place that says I can get promoted, but then never follows through on that, never invests in me as an individual to help me learn and grow. So on this next slide, you'll see a couple key things that are part of the job architecture and demonstrate why it's so incredibly important to have one of these frameworks in place. I do have the link there to an article if you want to read about the job architecture a little bit further. Certainly feel free to go click on it once you get the PDF, and you'll be able to pull up that article and read a little bit more. So as we look at this graphic, I didn't create it, I found it, I thought it visually represented what I wanted to say. And so when we do have that job architecture in place, right, it helps improve that role clarity. What's expected of me? Do I understand how to perform my work, and so forth? And then as an organization, you may be able to easily see if you have some talent gaps, right? So maybe it's with technology, maybe it's with the ability to do problem solving or thinking critically, etc. It can strengthen your compensation strategy potentially as we define those pay ranges and pay grades. It will help with HR functions because you'll have a model in place that will help with some of those decisions that you make, whether you're promoting somebody or hiring somebody into a role, etc. And overall, the employee should feel a different experience than where they've worked before. They should truly see, hey, there's a path forward for me that I can personally and professionally continue to learn and grow. And we know that's really important for many people. That's at the end of the day what they're looking for, is that opportunity. And yes, it's not cookie cutter and it's not just a blanketed approach, but hopefully we're able to identify how can we make it meaningful for each person on our team. So here's a quick sample. Certainly this is not all inclusive, and this does represent a lot of technical roles, but we could definitely throw up a sample here pretty quickly of non-technical. I've walked through both instances with various different companies and so forth, so the exercise is very similar. It's just a matter of deciding what goes where. Excuse me. So as we look at this sample here that I have in front of you, we first want to define who are our job families, right? We have technical professionals, then we might have support individuals, we might have IT individuals, HR, etc. So what is that job family? How do we want to group people together? Some organizations might just keep it simple and say technical versus non-technical. You have the flexibility to do with it what you want. But then you want to go ahead and define those subfamilies. So in this example, as we look at technical professionals, we want to identify who are those little subgroups within our organization. And there might be variations here too from one company to another. So I don't think this is fixed and hard and true. I very much have enjoyed putting puzzles together my whole life. I'll even just randomly open up Sudoku on my phone as a way to relax. So I see this very similar. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, right? And it's fun going on the journey to have these conversations and ask questions and say, hey, how do we want to put people together in a very unique way so that way they belong to a family and then we can see how it relates to the individual. And one thing to note here too is that people don't always have to progress from level 1 to level 6. They might step over. So at some point you might have a senior engineer said, hey, I want to just become a project manager for the rest of my career, right? Or they say, no, I don't want to do that. I want to stay technically awesome and I'm just going to stay right there in my path and work my way up, hopefully in a technical path that we've allowed for them. Some organizations will put that people path as well, so that way if they want to lead and manage others, they have the ability to do so too. So you can see how this can definitely expand pretty quickly just based on those examples that I had shared. But essentially, don't get too far in the weeds with the numbering of the levels. Those will absolutely shift and shake, and potentially you might have some roles. So if you look at the senior project manager role there, that one goes over 2 levels. And so as we pull together information and we start then looking at people in those seats, we might find our pay ranges or the amount of time in those roles, the experience, definitely could cause us to want to go over 2, 3, or more different levels. So hopefully this has been helpful to at least have a visual to connect with what the job architecture is, right? It's a framework that guides our decisions. So how does somebody move from one level to the next? And we'll get to the details of that on the next couple of slides. But essentially, here is a path that if somebody comes in as an intern, they can see they have an opportunity at some point to become a chief architect, right? Or as an intern, I'm walking in and saying, hey, maybe I don't want to just do technical work my whole career. Maybe I want to step over and learn how to coordinate projects and be part of that project management team, etc. I know many of you are saying, well, a lot of times you're doing both. Yeah, you might do 2 roles, but in some of the large organizations, you'll step over fully and become maybe just a full-time project manager. Still do a little bit of technical work, but basically just managing those projects of one team or multiple teams. All right, so the next step, again, you can call this whatever you want. The name that rings well to me is a job matrix, right? Again, We would be building out a spreadsheet initially. You can use other fancy tools if you want to, but you want to think about what are the different technical abilities, maybe non-technical responsibilities somebody has. You want to think about the knowledge, skills, and abilities, etc., that somebody is responsible for. So I go back to a couple of years ago, I was helping somebody with this exercise, and they were struggling to look at each individual job next to each other on a job description. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just put this in a spreadsheet. Let's go ahead and take a look at what are the key things that we want to focus on as far as the technical work, their ability to do drawings, to design, et cetera, et cetera. Then is there a component of their job where they are doing some project management? Then do they have any responsibility for growing business, right, in that business development and networking area? Are they a leader? Are they mentoring, coaching, and guiding others? What type of technology do they have to have, et cetera, et cetera? So as you can see, we start building some of these key buckets of where now we need to define what is it, right? So as an intern, what does that mean? If I'm focusing on design, right? I need to specifically spell that out. Maybe they have to have building knowledge of engineering or architecture terms. Maybe they have to have a basic understanding or be able to complete basic tasks, right? And so as we work up those steps that you saw on the previous screen, where we're going to level 2 now, what does that look like next? Is it now more moderate understanding? Is it increasing complexity of the work? And so when we have the spreadsheet, we're able to see from a progression standpoint how we build on that. I know you're probably all saying, give me a visual. Well, I'm sorry, I don't have one here today because there's a lot more content we have to go to, and we'd all get busy looking at the granular details. But essentially, the job matrix is going to define specifically what do we expect, what are the skills and abilities, and what's that accumulated knowledge and experience that somebody has to have to be successful performing this role. Because then if somebody's really eager to continue to progressively grow in their career, they're going to look at that next role and say, oh, here are some of the things I need to learn how to do in order to continue to increase my knowledge, skills, abilities, etc. That all then feeds right into the job description. So once you get the job matrix done, now you can populate those job descriptions pretty easily. And it's not that difficult of a task now where it can be overwhelming. That's why many of you who would have selected that you need to update these, because you know how time invasive it is, right? Well, I've tried to simplify the process to make this easier. It's hard work. It definitely is. However, you should be able to see that, you know, when we start lining these roles up side by side and we're thinking in specific categories, just helps shape our understanding and helps us work through specifically what are we looking for in that career path of the individuals who are in our organization and providing the services that we are to our clients. So once we go through, you know, defining the roles and so forth, it is important that we do have the job descriptions. I've had people along the way argue and say, we don't need them. Well, I don't agree with that, and I'll continue to disagree with that until we find a better way. But at the end of the day, I want somebody to understand, what are they signing up for? When they say yes to the offer letter, what is it truly that they're going to be doing that they'll feel good about, that they feel they can be successful, right? And so down the road, we sometimes have those bad apples, right? And we might have to point back to it and say, hey, remember you agreed that this was going to be the role, and I'm not understanding why we're not aligned anymore, right? So it can be a great tool to, one, just set expectation, provide clarity, and two, to be able to bring people back to that place if they're not performing the way that we need or want them to. So after we go through defining the roles, we have to be cautious not to start inserting people too soon, because then we start crafting jobs around one or two people who have specific skill sets, and I caution you against that. We want to make sure we define the roles that are needed in the organization, and then we put people in those places. So we would then go ahead and assign each of our people into one of these buckets, assuming this is a wholly inclusive job family or job architecture for our organization. And so we might at that point in time say, hey, you know what? We've been calling them a senior engineer too, but they really don't have these skills, the knowledge, the experience that we're now expecting as a senior engineer too. So we're going to have to go ahead and put them as a senior engineer 1. Boy, that's a hard conversation, right? But it's possible, because if you go back to purpose and you talk about why this is so important and get people to understand, hey, here are the roles, this is why we defined it this way, and this is where you currently sit. However, you have opportunity now to grow into this additional role, and here are the things you need to do to round out your knowledge, skills, ability, experience, etc. Right? Because you absolutely will have outliers, and we'll have to work through that, and we'll talk about outliers again when we get to compensation benchmarking. So I'm going to have you do another polling question here while I take a sip of water. So what process do you follow for determining your training priorities? So maybe management just says, hey, I want you to send this person to this class. Maybe you do a formal skill gap assessment and you're further down the path, and maybe some of your competitors, maybe you don't even have a process, and that's okay, right? And maybe there's something different that I haven't mentioned here. So go ahead and get those selected. We'll share the results as soon as we're done. And Kaylee, I'm going to check in with you to see, before we shift into the next section, if we have any specific questions for that section we just covered.
Sure thing. So I'll leave the poll open so we can get a few more people to vote here. But there was just one question. It's not really a question. They said, will we be able to get a recording of this? This is awesome stuff. And yes, there will be a recording made available to you. We will send you a follow-up email with that link in there. We also host all of our webinars on demand on our website. So every single one of them is up there and recorded. So feel free to browse around. And like Kristi said, she did a bunch of different webinars about 6 months ago. There's one on organizational architecture up there as well. So yes, Catherine, it will be recorded. All right.
Yeah, I extend to any of you that if you want to have a follow-up conversation on any one of these points, please don't hesitate to reach out. As you can tell, I'm kind of passionate about it. I get excited talking about it. So if you just want me to drill even further, or maybe share some of the visuals, I know the job matrix, I didn't put an image in there, and thinking back, I probably should have at least done a quick hit. But yeah, we still got a lot of good stuff to go here. So thank you for participating. Kaylee is sharing those results with you. And management recommendations. You know, that definitely is important, that they support the training, that they identify who might need some additional training, or they see individuals who have the potential to continue to learn and grow. But I have to imagine that managers don't always prioritize in the same way, right? So if they don't have a framework and they don't have a tool, we could just have a misalignment there. I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent, just saying that's a potential there with those management recommendations. Kudos to the 18% that have a skills gap assessment. I love it. And if you don't have anything, well, you're definitely going to take away some ideas today. So please don't feel bad. It's no shaming at all. I appreciate your honesty, and we're going to go ahead and move forward here. So at a very high level, a skills gap assessment can do a really good job of saying, hey, you know, what are the skills that we expect in each role? So as you look at your job matrix and you start putting people in there, you're going to see pretty quickly, are there gaps? Maybe some are little small gaps, not to worry, but what if you have a critical one, right? Well, you're going to want to do something rather quickly, probably this year, to get that addressed. Because one, either somebody might be overcompensated, right? So they're being paid more than the skills support them to be paid. Maybe you are seeing a decrease in quality or quantity of work because that skill isn't as sharp as it needs to be. So there's pros and cons here either way when we see a skills gap. So one, we want to assess the skills of each person according to now the roles that we've defined. We then want to say, okay, what gaps do we have? Which ones are critically important today? What are some that we're going to work on, hopefully in the coming year or two, to get people to continue to progress? And then what's that plan? Instead of just letting management pick, now we'll have some data. We'll have information that'll guide those conversations. And it might even elevate the importance of where the training money is spent when you're gathered around the budget table or the leadership table, right? There were many years throughout my career, I remember that training and development was one of the first things that was taken off, right? So if we saw a downturn in business, especially through the recession, that was one where we just pulled back, and rightfully so, because we had to continue to be able to pay people to work. However, as you can see, the importance of investing in our people, keeping them and retaining them now takes a higher priority. And maybe there's some other things like pizza parties that will shave out of the budget, right, instead. So yeah, you want to come up with a plan that everybody feels good about, that you have good data to support. And then once you address those critical skills gaps, now you can look forward at, okay, what are those learning and development plans that we're excited to put in front of our people as we're meeting with them with their performance review or those ongoing check-ins that we might have monthly, etc. And then you as a firm can decide, okay, how often are we going to reassess this, right? Is it going to be every 6 months, every year? And that frequency might change. It might be different from one area to the next. Remember, depending on if you're in growth mode, you have a lot of things that are unsettled, and that's going to take a lot of energy until you get to the place where you're plateauing a little bit, versus a more mature area, you might not have as much learning and development that can occur, right? Because you're pretty much in a good, stable place. However, there's always new things with technology, etc., that you can introduce to people and help them learn and grow. It just might be in more microbites, right? Rather than those bigger bite-sized pieces. So let's move forward into the career paths now. So the career path is really aligning the opportunities that we offer for employees and their growth, right? And we're taking a look at their talents. We're saying, what do they currently do really well? What skills have they accumulated, or the knowledge that they've captured along the way, and how do we leverage that, right? And you might find that you create a brand new role based upon a person, but that approach shouldn't be done to at least establish that first framework, right? So people, when they are looking at different organizations, they want to know, how do I get from one place to the other? If I join your organization, what are you going to do to help me continue to learn and grow? Because it's important to me to be able to do that. And I know a lot of people are changing jobs right now because of compensation, but that's only short-lived, right? Yeah, we have to kind of keep pace and stay competitive. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But this is the place. This is where people long-term will stay motivated if they have the opportunity to continue to expand what they do and how they do it. And it might not be vertical. It just could be horizontal, doing something different, applying the skills that they already have. So 3 words come to mind. You probably saw the blog that we wrote, and as I was crafting that and getting help from my marketing team, these 3 words came out. And I'm like, I, as an employee sitting in an organization, I want clarity. I want to know how I can be my best self. I want potential. I want to be able to do great things. And I want to make sure that my work is meaningful and that I have an impact on something or someone, right? So hopefully these 3 words resonate with all of you too, because I kind of got excited as I was thinking about career paths and these 3 words. It's like, what do I really want in a career path? And so I always go back to the definition. So we're talking about a common language here. And so, it's my perception or understanding of something. And I have to make sure, and an organization has to make sure that we're clear, that we have that clarity of, what does that future look like? And so that's where that job matrix really helps define the role. The job description then is helping to acknowledge, hey, here are some of the other things that round out that role in the matrix. But then how can I be successful? So then it's up to me to perform. And so just making sure that we continue to keep that clarity for somebody, that they're not mystified because you're asking me to do all these things and it wasn't in my job description and I'm not good at that, but I'm good at what I was hired for, right? So are we inevitably creating some chaos because our job descriptions aren't up to date, or we don't have a framework to really help people understand how to be successful and what do they control in their own power to make sure that that happens, right? We just want to align those expectations. I go back to an example. Many years ago, I had hired a young lady. She was on my team for 30 days, and this wasn't at Stand Nest, but I sat down with her after those 30 days and I said, hey, how was your training? How's it going? And she's like, I didn't get training. I'm like, what? Wait a minute. In my head, there's a conversation happening where I just paid you 40 hours a week to do all these things. You played in the system, you sat with all of these people who showed you the way, and it was on the job training. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't clear, and I didn't provide the clarity of what that would look like, right? That this truly was on the job shadowing, and this is the role you're performing. And so, definitely a big lesson for me, not specific to career path, but it just shows where we could be misaligned, but coming in, we think we're on the same page, right? So that's why those check-ins are so important. As we think about potential, capable of being or becoming. So what's in me? Sometimes I don't even know myself. So I need a mentor or a coach to bring that out, or to observe my work and then share feedback telling me, hey, this is when I saw you light up. Here's where I saw you procrastinate. And how do we get more of those moments that you light up, right? And so being intentional about helping people understand how do they grow, what are ways they can learn and continue to develop. And if we're incorporating that in our recruiting and retention strategies, and we have tools to point back to, people know we're serious. They know we're intentional, and it's not just lip service that, oh yeah, we're going to send you to a conference, and then the year passes by and I didn't get to go, and now I'm feeling less than enthused because you said you would do it and you didn't follow through. So you can just see that we want to be able to support the things that we're saying, get people excited, and then follow through. And you're really going to feel good because you allowed or helped somebody get the best version of themselves. And then think about the impact, right? So whether I'm doing specific type of project work where I'm building safer communities, right? Helping schools to be in a safer place, or whether I'm building those bridges that are going to be structurally sound and they're not going to collapse as people are driving over them. And I'm not trying to be morbid, but you can see that impact could be in a big way, or it could be in a small way where I have the ability every single day to help people learn and grow, even in those micro bite-sized pieces, that they can feel successful. So I'm helping them be able to see their potential, and that's the impact that I'm having on them, right? Everybody wants to know that what they're doing is making a difference and having an impact, so it doesn't feel like it's wasted effort. So let's go back to the business life cycle, right? So there's a couple key points we haven't talked about, and I want to call your attention to it. You've heard me talk about it before if you've participated in any of my webinars. But as you think about the business life cycle, if you're in significant growth mode, you have to think about the amount of change that the individual is going to have to walk through with you as you grow. And so that piece is so important, because do we have the things in place to help that person be successful? Do we have the people in the right leadership role? Do we have the right expectations of our leadership team who's in this service area that's significantly growing? Or do we have another area that's more stable that doesn't require the same type of change management or handling of change? And so pairing up people to those situations and to those leaders is so important. And that's what I think we're missing in the recruiting conversation, and what we're trying to peel the onion back on in the retention strategies that we have. So let's go to this next slide. Because if I'm in significant growth mode, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm growing a business area, I need people who can walk through this pretty quickly, right? You start out, you have to bring closure to something. Maybe it's a service we're no longer offering, or a former job. And there's these emotions that come into play. And this is the William Bridges transition model. You can read all about him on the internet. There's books that he wrote and so forth. But there's emotions surrounding all of this. So one, finding the people who can go through this pretty quickly to get where you need them to be to help grow the business, or making sure you don't put somebody in a position where they would flounder, where they would not be successful because they're not good with change, right? Can go either way. And then layer on top of that, your leaders. So do your leaders have the ability to help somebody through their career, either slowly or fastly, right? That's two different type of leadership styles. And we found out pretty quickly over the past couple of years how we had to shift as leaders to do things differently as we were, thrown into a major transformation of the way in which we do work, all going remote and now trying to come back in the office. So many examples that we could pull from with this, but I just wanted to call your attention because as we're thinking about the path of somebody, yeah, we can have a great framework in place, but if we're not considering the impact of change and technology in that equation, we still might not be successful. So just remember that as you're thinking about people and the paths that you offer and who is the right fit for your organization. They might be excited about all the work that you're doing, but some of their other skills and abilities, etc., may not align for you as an organization today or in the future. So let's do our third and final poll question here. I'm interested to see what you think is the main driver for people switching their job. I know a lot of people probably are saying compensation, right? Yeah, there's stupid money being paid, but I think that's going to slow down a little bit. Is it because you're seeing that maybe we don't offer the career path that people are looking for, or we do have a career path and the place that they're coming from did not, right? There's opportunity in that. Maybe it's the type of work that you do or the projects. They're excited to maybe do something commercial and they've spent most of their time residential, or they want to do some 3D printing instead of hand assembly of products, right? The list can go on. Or is it all of the above? Kaylee, do we have any other questions in here while we're waiting for the poll to finish up?
We do not have any more questions.
All right.
You're covering what everybody's thinking.
I guess you're either doing a really good job or they're shaking their heads. That's an advantage. All of you aren't sharing your cameras, so you get to look at me. I don't get to look at you, but that's okay.
Well, we do have 87%, so I'm going to go ahead and close and share the results for you, Kristi.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that you're seeing a mixture of all of this, right? Compensation, yeah, I think some industries have been behind pace for far too long, so they're catching up to the rest of the world. I do think that larger organizations are paying stupid money. So think about an organization that has 100,000 people, right? If they have 10% turnover, they're hiring 10,000 people a year, right? Well, you and I know that we're a smaller organization and we're having trouble. How in the world would we increase that volume and try to meet that demand? And the only thing that, in my mind, that they're doing is they're offering stupid money. But every single day on the news, I'm hearing of companies who are doing layoffs. And so I do see where it's probably going to start shrinking back. Do I think compensation will go back to the place it was? Absolutely not. You can't rewind it, right? But I do think there will be some balancing, especially if the economy's, constricting and pulling back a little bit. I think it'll kind of relieve itself a little bit, but not back to what we were a year or two ago. So, all right. Now that we've talked about the job architecture and we've talked about the career pathing, I want to shift over a little bit to the HR side of it here and connect all these pieces now as you're thinking about how do I apply this to what we do with recruiting and retention. So a couple slides on that, and then we'll go ahead and round out the hour and hopefully open it up for a couple questions, or please share insights. I'm not claiming to know it all. So right here, you've heard employee journey, you've heard employee experience, and I, at one point in a conversation with a teammate, we were talking about, from the time we onboard someone, we're recruiting and then onboard them, and then we say goodbye or farewell, and that's how it started. And I'm like, wait a minute, I actually want to say hello before I'm trying to recruit them, right? So I'm tapping on their shoulder, hello, how are you? And so when you think about from the time you're saying hello to somebody, whether you're just trying to build a connection with the hope of, hey, maybe one day I'll hire them or they'll lead me to somebody that I can hire, what is that first impression? And what are we talking about? Are we saying the exact same thing that our competitor is saying? We're the best architecture firm, we're the best engineering firm, we manufacture the best products, and the list could go on, right? We make the safest vehicles. many ways that we could describe every single company out there doing that type of work, right? But if I go to your website and I want to check you out because you tapped on my shoulder and said, hi, I'd love to get to know you. I'm going to go to your website and I'm going to say, how are they different? What shows me they're different on their website? Because that's the first place I get to secretly check you out without you knowing. I'll go to your LinkedIn, I'll go to Facebook, I'll socially look at the people that work for your company and I'll see what they're doing, right? Be a little bit of a detective. And so when I'm doing that, can I tell what your culture's like? Can I see that you're a diverse organization? Can I see that there looks like opportunity for me to grow and work on some really cool things, right? So go to your website, take a look at that from the lens of being an outsider, wanting to know more about this person who just said hello to me, right? And so as you're walking through that journey with somebody and you're getting to the place where they might join your organization, when do you introduce them to the career path you offer? Maybe you don't formally call it a career path, but you probably have some language you're using already to describe how somebody can build their skills within your organization. And if not, figure out that elevator speech, right? Even if you're still trying to figure it all out, you don't have it all mapped out in a pretty framework, it's okay. Just start introducing that sooner because those are things that are going to catch with people. It's going to be a way that you describe it that's different than somebody else, maybe that they're just going to hook in. So not only when you're saying hello, but as you're walking through that journey with your people, think about the last time you've talked to somebody that's been with you for 10 years about, hey, what are you interested in continuing to learn and grow? Or what about somebody who's nearing 60 years old and, hey, retirement's not too far away? What do you still want to do and be part of your legacy as you move towards retirement, right? Each point along somebody's season of life, you can ask questions just to find out more and saying, hey, are we able to help them with that? Do we offer things that maybe they don't even know about and get them re-excited, re-engaged, etc., right? So as you think about leveraging career paths in the recruiting and retention, I have just the image there again so we can connect it. You don't have to try to remember what was all on there before, but what's that employee experience? Do I only have one opportunity to come in and I sit there for the rest of my career? Do I truly have the ability to progress? Or am I going to get capped out or bumped out because there's people sitting in those roles who aren't leaving in 10 years unless they decide to quit? So what can you do for me instead so I still would be interested in staying with you? What does that development look like? Oh, I could move over to the project management job family. Great, tell me more, right? So it could be any type of job family, but think about those side steps, think about the progressive steps, etc. And what's the story at your organization? I told you this is like a puzzle, right? We pull it all together in a unique way, and that's what creates your competitive advantage. And so I can't give you something off of the shelf that's going to work for you as much as you might want, but we could go on the journey together and we could figure this out, and you could be really excited about the potential of this. So now let's pull it together with the compensation, right? We talked about how important that is. Many people are switching jobs because of it. At least that was what we're seeing today. But when's the last time you did some benchmarking? When have you gone out to the industry and looked at the data that's being collected? So here very shortly in the next couple of months, we'll start getting that 2022 data. And I'm really interested to see that because yeah, we saw some interesting things going from 21, right, in the reports last year. But what's really going to happen now in 2023? Is it as shocking as we might expect, or is it not? And I'm so excited to see the story of that. But as we think about, the compensation data that we're pointing to, what does that mean? Have we really aligned our roles so we're lining it up as closely as we can to the data? Because I'll tell you, people put job titles on roles and it's like lipstick. It doesn't matter the color, it still does the same thing. So some person might call it an architect too, and somebody else might call it architectural staff too, right? And so we have to have a better understanding of what the role does and the responsibilities, so that way we can make sure we line that data up. Because then essentially, if we know what the midpoint of the salary data is, we don't usually like to use the mean, that's the average, right? Because it could be skewed, but the midpoint, there's an equal number above and below. if we take that midpoint and we say that's where we're going to point ourselves as an organization, then we can do that for each one of these roles here on this sample. And so from there, we can decide what's the stretch in that role. How low, below the midpoint, or how far above do we want to go? And that's going to be dependent probably a lot on where these individuals are in their career. So it's kind of like a tornado funnel cloud or cone, right? Down at level 1, level 2, those individuals might sit there for 1, 2, 3 years. But as you start getting up into the higher levels, people might stay there for 10 plus years. And so that stretch might have to be a little more. So we might have a 10% stretch across that midpoint as an intern, but then as we get higher level up, we're going to stretch that maybe up as much as 40 or 50%. So now when you have those pay ranges established, right, now that guides our decisions. Well, why would we pay somebody above the midpoint, right? Well, because they have an extra skill, they're specialized, they have a significant amount more experience and have no desire to go down a leadership path, right? Or, hey, we're just bringing this person in here into this role. They're year 1, they still have a couple things that they're missing in the role that are critical skills. We're going to pay them slightly below the midpoint, but get them to the midpoint as soon as we can, right? By increasing their skills and experience, etc. You might also have where you don't have a defined project management job family and you have somebody serving in 2 roles. Another common one is business development. So you might have to think about that in your range and do a little bit of blending and so forth. And undoubtedly, as we go through that employee leveling exercise, right, you're going to have some people that were paid as a senior engineer too, but don't meet that, and now their compensation's out of whack. Well, what do we do with that, right? Well, there's conversations surrounding that. Can be delicate, but we can work through that. And so you might also see those people who are very senior in their career, 20, 30, 40 years, that they do stretch outside of those bands, but it's well worth it because you know the value that they bring to each project or thing that they do. It just explains it. So you definitely have some stories there paired with the ranges, the compensation, and so forth. And then, you know, what does it look like if we're promoting somebody? As we're walking them from level 1 to 2 to 3, what does that compensation stretch look like? And how will that excite them to be able to continue to not only learn and grow, but then be rewarded through the compensation that they have? And yes, we could talk a full hour just on compensation benchmarking and strategies, because there's so many other things that go into that. We just don't have the time today. But I wanted you to see how once you have this framework in place, you can then also layer on that compensation. And now it can really be the framework, right, to help you with making those decisions about who's eligible to continue to progress, who might need a little bit more attention and energy, mentoring, coaching, etc. And how do we make sure that we don't have hiring managers out there just offering these enormous salaries because they say, I have to have that person, I'm going to pay whatever I can to get that person, right? We want to kind of keep them in those guide rails. So we talked about a lot today. We have about 7 minutes left. Kaylee, do we have any questions before we close out the hour?
I do believe we have about 1 or 2. So there is a comment in response to the last poll that we did about why people were leaving. And he said, I have some folks leaving due to retirement. So are you seeing that a lot as well?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we have about 80 million baby boomers. Well, what does that mean? Well, if they all retired at the age of 65, they would be out of our organizations around 2030, right? That's 7 years. That's a lot of people leaving the workplace. Now, will some stay longer? Absolutely. Will some leave sooner? They might, right? Illness, etc. And so, yes, that is going to continue to put pressure on organizations because we have lower than normal birth rates, lower than normal graduation rates, and then to be able to find the people, the diamonds in the rough in the industry that we're working in is incredibly hard. So conversations that are super helpful right now is identifying those skills that are walking away, that experience, that knowledge. What are we losing? Is it still relevant? How do we capture it? How do we put succession plans in place, right? To make sure we get the people trained and skilled up to be able to step in and maybe do some of that work. So I don't think it's going to be apples to apples. Going forward, you're going to have an apple to orange scenario where some of the skills that they were awesome just aren't relevant because maybe technology did away with that, right? And so it may be unique to your organization, but yeah, have the conversations now because it's just going to increase in volume as we move forward. Because the bad news, there are just about half, a little more than half the size of Gen X. So if we have nearly 80, we have just a little over 41 million Gen X. Well, there's not enough to step in those shoes, right? So we got to look at the younger generations. What skills can they learn and what are the things that they can do to step over? Even if it isn't some of the senior leadership roles quite yet, there are some pieces and parts that they might be able to do. So great question. Thank you for asking that.
All right, there is one more question here, and it says, what do you do with what I call factory workers that really don't have a career path and don't want one?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we need technically awesome people. We need those steady eddies, I call them, right? And so, what are they interested in? Is there community work that they'd be excited to be part of? Is it maybe just a special project internally or a committee? And if they're just happy to give you their all in the 40 hours that they're there, well, then, let's embrace it while we have them. So, yeah, sometimes just having some special ad hoc projects. Hey, let's build a garden outside so we can all enjoy it or something like that. Could just give them something extra to look forward to when they come to work instead of the daily grind.
And it doesn't look like there's any more questions in here. So do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Hopefully you are able to take away a couple action items or simple things to start implementing, or at least a way to start the conversation in your organization. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. And thank you, Kaylee. I appreciate you being here as well.
Of course, yeah. And hey, for the record, there's a couple comments in here that say that you're doing a great job. So that's why there's no questions. But if you do have a question, of course, if you do have a question, drop it into the survey. We will have Kristi answer those as soon as she can. So with that, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you on a future webinar.
Take care.